More than 2.3 billion people use Android smartphones around the world. And Alphabet, the owner of this operating system, is also the owner of the world's most popular online search engine, Google. Now, the EU's competition watchdog has imposed a record $5 billion fine on the company for abusing its market dominance to muscle out competitors.
Google has engaged in illegal practices to cement its dominant market position in Internet search. It must put an effective end to this conduct within 90 days or face penalty payments.
The EU says Google requires phone manufacturers to install its search and browser applications on all devices that use its Android operating system. It pays phone companies and cellular network services to ensure no similar apps developed by its competitors are installed on these devices. And the EU says the company has obstructed the development of other mobile operating systems. Separately, the online search giant's ad placement software AdSense is also under investigation for monopolistic practices. And last year, its online shopping service was fined $2.8 billion by the EU for limiting choices for consumers. But analysts say the hefty penalties aren't enough to make Google change its ways or lose popularity.
Even if Google is forced to offer buyers of Android smartphones a choice of where to download their apps, many will simply go back to the Google Play Store. That's what they know, that's what they're used to, and that's what they like.
And even this outcome may be years away. Google says it needs a hold on the ads market to keep its software free for users. It will challenge the ruling, and analysts believe the slow pace of the EU's judicial system will ensure Google remains the undisputed king of the internet for some time to come. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Jack Parrock has more from Brussels.
Says it will appeal this ruling by the European Commission, and it also says that it's unfair. It says that Google's place in the market has allowed companies to flourish, that it's been able to boost research and innovation in the tech sector, and essentially that it's supported other tech companies in building their own businesses. That's not what the European Commission says, though. The European Commission says it's muscled out anyone that's tried to get in on its search engine services here in Europe, and there's something needed to be done. As you said, it's a $5 billion fine, a record on top of the 2.8 European Commission slapped on Google for its shopping services a year ago. This is a big entrenched war, essentially, between the European Commission and Google, and is likely to continue with many more investigations and probes going on into Google's practices and the way it uses its market dominance.
Let's get more on this now from Mark Skilton from the Warwick Business School. He's a professor of practice in information systems and management and has been closely following this case. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, EU regulators say Google is illegally cementing its dominant position in search. Are they right?
Well, yes. I mean, it depends which side of the coin. If you listen to Google, and likewise with the issues with Facebook and Microsoft, these large cloud providers, if you will, is that they say, well, they almost cry wolf. Well, of course, we've got to compete with these other big cloud providers. And also, in order to give a good service or to keep your users safe, then we need to control everything. I think it's just, it's not very user-centric in the sense we don't have much choice. But briefly, just the reasoning behind this to me is that if you look at the turnover of Alphabet, who owns Google, it's about $110 billion. And you look at the amount of money that Google tends to make out of advertising, it's about 94 billion. So it's a very large proportion of the total group turnover. And the reason why all of this, to cut a long story short, they've been forcing mobile operators and device manufacturers to install their software as they want to get people to use their search engine, which then drives their advertising revenue. So there's a motive behind the motive. And I think this is rightly so to be challenged by the European Commission.
Yes, so you mentioned Google's or Alphabet's revenue there, and crunching the numbers, the $5 billion penalty that's been handed down is the same amount of money as what it makes every 16 days last year. So really it's a drop in the ocean that is Alphabet's revenue. Do you think this fine will do anything to force the company to change its ways?
Well, historically, when you look at, say, personal data or the advertising model by not just Google but others to try and be a bit more even-handed about this, they've not changed their models. This time round, as they've had I believe the European Commission can fine them up to 5% of global turnover, which is the 5 billion of the, well, let's call it the 110 billion turnover. But if they don't change within 90 days, then they will get penalties. So there'll be more money on top of that and start to siphon off money. Now, Google has got a lot of working capital. It's acquired a lot of money. It's a very rich company. But commercially, they're going to have to do something about this. So the question, a bit like the telecoms industry in the UK, which had to, about a decade ago, become more open to let third parties run on the infrastructure, I think Google is coming to what they call the Microsoft moment, where they're going to have to sort of think about allowing other operating systems, like, for example, the Amazon Fire operating system and others, to have at least a say in giving some users some choice.
Yes, and unsurprisingly, Google has rejected the EU's concerns, claiming that its app bundling practice does allow users to install alternatives on their Android devices. Obviously, it's going to be appealing this ruling. Does Google or Alphabet have any chance of success?
Well, I don't think so. I think one of the things that I'm beginning to see with the European Commission across GDPR, which is the personal privacy, the whole debate there, is I think they're getting more strident, more aggressive, if it depends which way you want to describe it. And I think the time of what we call the Web 2.0 world, which started in the early 2000s with all the social media explosion, it's a fantastic thing. But now you look at fake news, you look at personal data, you look at market dominance. I think there needs to be a new set of models going forward as we go to the next level of distributed systems, without getting too technical. And I think this commercial model of just owning the whole market is just not viable long term. And I think Google and others are going to have to realise that and make some changes.
And we've seen EU regulators in recent years really go after these Silicon Valley giants. Just a couple of years ago, Apple was ordered to repay some $15 billion in back taxes to Ireland. Just last year, Google was fined $2.5 billion for its adware technology, and now this latest fine. Why are EU regulators going for these juggernauts? Why aren't US authorities doing anything about them?
Well, I have some good friends in America, and I like America, apart from the political situation, which is not part of this conversation here, is that you've got to think about the global nature of the digital economy. And so although we live in Europe, where our local markets are, all these companies happen to come from the States. They have sovereignty over there. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, where is this tax going, taking the tax back from Ireland, as in your example with Apple, repatriating it back to America? Obviously, from an American point of view, this is a great success story. From a European view, and then you never mind the Chinese view, and you look at the whole thing that's going on with the search engines over there, in the Europeans, they've kind of missed the boat a bit. Now, you could say, well, that's just life, just get over it. But I think the issue really is around you and I locally cannot use local search engines. We can't kind of localize it. We have no control. I'm not saying that we get the power of the search engines, we get the power of these behemoths, to call it that. But there just is very little alternatives from a European perspective. And I think it's right, if I'm wearing my European hat, to have some level playing field. And really, this is what this is about. It's not about bashing the Americans.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's about getting a level
Mark.
playing field.
We will have to leave it there, but we will see how Google responds within that 90-day period that the EU has given that company. Mark Skilton from Warwick Business School, thank you.